between who you know, network to sort of broaden your knowledge base. You can network to sell. But if you look at it as connecting the dots and building relationships and look at it as a lifelong skill, I think that, that's a very valuable skill to have, almost as valuable as being really good at what you do. And I like to look at it as a give and take, so that you're sort of out there with a goal, whether it's to find a job, an internship, sell a product, and the person you're networking with probably, has something that he or she wants as well. So it's important to listen as well as talk. And that's my 2 cents, but I can come back and add to that if you're interested.
No, that was great. I completely agree with what Robyn said, particularly the give and take. I think it's something that you consider to be intentional relationship building. And the reason I say intentional is because there's very few people that, spring forth and are natural networkers. You're always going to come across a few of those people, and let me tell you, you will admire them and wonder how they do it. But for the most part, it's intentional because it requires you to be a little bit thoughtful about the kinds of relationships that you want to build in your career, and to figure out what are the ones that are going to work for you and work for the person you're networking with, and then to invest in those relationships and nurture them over time. So it's a skill. It's like practicing a sport or exercising or any other kind of skill. It can be learned, and you should be prepared to not be exceptional at it the first time you try. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I'll add just that we took sales training once upon a time, and the quote that always sticks with me now is that in what we do, and frankly in whatever you do, you need to be really good at networking, or you need to be friends with someone who is, right? And I just think that I think about that a lot, because I think to a lot of people, networking is the work part of networking stands out, as in this is hard, this is stressful, this is something I need to really work at, and you do need to work at it. But I also think that some of the pressure can be relieved within what networking is if you sort of take an always on approach to it, in that networking isn't necessarily just when you sort of send an email to someone that used to work at the Collegian, hypothetically, and ask them for updates or, job information. It's also the person you meet on the plane or the train, or someone that you used to be on a sports team with. It's in many ways, it's life to me. And I think if you're just good at that, if you're really sort of continually honing your comms skills and your personality skills and your just ability to keep in touch with people and be thoughtful, to Robyn and Karen's points, it's fun. It's fun, and it will make you successful because it will open up doors and opportunities that you wouldn't have even thought of intentionally necessarily trying to open, because you've already done the job sort of setting things in motion already. So I think about it that way. It's just sort of being core to who you are and core to your day to day.
So like, how does one get started? Like, you can't just go to like the president of a company and ask for a job. So like, how do you just kind of start building those relationships?
Well, I think first of all, you keep you keep your contacts up to date, and you aren't, obviously in today's world there aren't many live events. So I'm a big proponent of stretch yourself but don't torture yourself. So in the days of live events, as Jordan says, we all know people who are incredibly extroverted and energetic and meet and collect 100, one or five really quality contacts, whether it's a virtual event or a live event. Have a game plan, know what you want, know in advance who you want to talk to. So even on a Zoom call, there might be somebody who, did something or worked for a company you're interested in working for or learning more about. And also sort of to the lifestyle issue, just be interested. I mean, if you work at the Collegian, most of you are journalists, and so you're inquisitive, you're naturally curious. So ask questions, link in with people who are interesting to you, and just be interested in and their answers when because really want to, but you want a meaningful connection. When I started in law firms, I wrote this little book on networking for lawyers, because most lawyers are introverts and they like to have sort of a tutorial. So these are like 30 things they could do, and they loved it. But you really have to be true to yourself. If you're not a real extrovert, scale down your goals, but make it a quality connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say too, you know, that number one, you know, especially if for you know, an undergrad that's on the call, you know, you can absolutely start now. So to the question of like, how do you get good at it, right? I mean, think of all the different circles and communities that just Penn State alone has, regardless of where people are right now. So from, you know, arts and culture to sports to clubs to different classes, et cetera, like if you just sat and spent 15 minutes saying like, who do I know? Who are my friend groups? Who are the friends of friends? LinkedIn and Facebook and Snap, everything that makes it a little easier to connect these days. But to me, a lot of that isn't necessarily meaningful connections in some cases. So if you do the basic homework of just starting to figure out who you know and who you're in touch with, and sort of not how can I leverage them, but, you know, in time, yeah, how might I be able to leverage them? Because again, the value here is building connections, and building them over time. You know, you start with your group from Penn State, and then you're going to get your first job and you're going to have another network, right? And then there's your network from your hometown, and then there's your family network, and then job 2 is going to happen. And then you're also keeping in contact with everyone that you worked with from job 1 and all the people you were friendly with at Penn State and all your hometown people. So as their networks expand, so too do yours. But you really only take advantage of that sort of accelerator if you're sort of constantly in touch with people. And again, depending on what you do and what you want to do, you know, trying to make it purposeful. So, you know, reaching out to people with a reason to reach out. You know, I read about your company in the Collegian. I saw an interview, or I noticed something that I think would be of value to you. So you're sharing that, things like that, where you're just taking time from your day. Again, whether it's during commute or you just have a thought early in the morning or late at night, reasons to reach out, I think help to strengthen your network. Because again, if you show that you're thinking of others in many ways, like human nature, in turn, people will start to think of you as well, which I think is the payoff here.
Right, and don't forget about the 6 degrees of separation. I mean, I really believe that. And I have basically reinvented myself a number of times. I went from being a reporter in a fairly rural area in northern Minnesota to moving to Chicago and switching to the dark side, the PR side.
Robyn, we're still having some tech issues with you. It seems like be going.
I really made a name for myself. Can you hear me better? No. Can you hear me better? No.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, actually, now I can.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I was just telling the story about how I really reinvented myself when I moved from being a reporter in northern Minnesota to Chicago, where I went to work at Edelman Worldwide and became a vice president in record time, because I really leveraged my networking with media. And I knew a lot of media folks from my Collegian days at Associated Press and People Magazine and the New York Times. But I also, and this was a year and a half after I graduated, I also did my homework and became very tuned into what media covered, so that I knew who covered what and I would give them stories that also made my clients very happy. So, you can network in a wide variety of areas, but keep those contacts, keep in touch with people you go to school with. I mean, they pay off. I still have friends from the Collegian that I deal with on a professional basis who are in the media.
I would also say, getting back to the question of how do you get into it and when do you break in? I mean, honestly, during the time that you're a student is an exceptional time to begin networking. It really is. Because in a way, whatever kind of outreach you might make to somebody that's further in their career, you have like the perfect reason to do it. It's not like you're looking for a job per se, although perhaps maybe someday you will be, but the initial outreach is really just to learn something. And that's what students do. That's what you all are there for. So it's the perfect time to reach out to folks. I think Jordan mentioned that you have to find what I would call a hook or a connection, whether that's the Collegian, it could be Penn State, it could be an article that you saw that they wrote. It could be a friend of your parents, anybody that you believe could provide you with some perspective on how to approach the job world, or in particular, you've heard something about a particular career or a particular company. You're wondering what the culture is, what can they tell you, what kind of advice might they have, are there special skills that you should try to acquire? You have so many avenues to ask advice when you're a student that frankly are a little more challenging to ask as you get out of studenthood. So perfect time to do it. The other thing I would add is, I don't know if you all have noticed it, but I certainly have. I think that basically the pandemic is creating a situation where people are generally socially starved. Okay, people are starving for interaction and connection. And so again, whereas in their busy days previously, professionals might have had less time, or maybe they were just more emotionally drained from all their meetings during the day. Now they're actually going to be so thrilled, I think, to hear from someone and to have a conversation and to connect. So coupling the fact that you're a student with the fact that all your prospects are kind of socially starved, there's literally no better time to start. And I would look at networking as you approach it a little bit like exercise, or when you start to, lift weights or something like that. You think to yourself, well, this is going to be really hard, or I'm going to ride my bike. Oh, today I only ran a mile. You think of it like that. You're going to get better at it over time as you practice, and set yourself an achievable goal. You might have a goal that you're going to reach out to somebody once a week. Okay, that's all it takes. Okay, that's all it takes. Reach out to somebody once a week, because over the course of time, I think the whole 7 degrees, the multiplicative effect, you're going to be surprised at how much that can do. But you have to set yourself a little goal, and you have to focus on it, and you have to make it an important part of your life, just like you do other things that are important, like exercise. So that's it.
One thing I want to say, I love that, Karen. I'm very surprised, and you and Robyn, I would think would agree, just in the world, at how few people actually take initiative. I mean, really, it's something so simple, so that, that analogy to running a mile, or reaching out to someone once, right? So, I mean, I've don't think less of me, but I have a friend I used to work with at Sports Illustrated that then went to work at Rutgers in their sports administration department. And so she had a bunch of us who live in New Jersey come and do networking sessions, intentional networking sessions with Rutgers student athletes for years. And it was sort of speed dating. They'd have three student athletes or 4 at a table, and then you'd ask a couple questions. Boom, they'd hit the buzzer, 2 minutes, and everyone moved. And in the course of 3 hours, you probably would meet with 200 student athletes for a few minutes a pop. And I'm not kidding. After those sessions, of those 200 or 300 athletes, 1 or 2 would reach out. That's it. And there's one I can tell you who, 2 years after meeting her at one of those events, we hired her at Sports Illustrated. And she interned, and then we hired her, and it's just the simple act of taking initiative, I guess, would be the point, that not everyone is doing it. So if you think about it that way, the little amount you might do, the little thoughtful outreach you might do now, and make that habit forming, it will pay off. I can guarantee it.
And I second that. I love the sports analogy. When you go to your first event, you might not know anyone. When you go to your second event, you might know one or two people, but it does pay off over time, and you just got to keep doing it. But as I said, don't torture yourself, but stretch yourself. I think it's really important that you have a goal in mind, that you set aside. I'm going to reach out to live in your comfort zone, but you got to do it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, and I would just throw in there that don't be discouraged. I mean, you might be super lucky your first time, and you reach out to somebody who's just wonderful and giving and full of encouragement, and you're just pumped up, and that gets you ready for the next one. And you might reach out the first time to somebody who's had a bad day, or maybe doesn't interact as well technologically, or what have you. What you can't do is let that discourage you. You have to get back on the horse and try again. So if it happens, which it always will, that you'll connect with a few people that you can just tell right away you're not going to keep that connection up. It's okay. There's many fish in the sea.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I know for me, like, I always think of networking
Right?
as
And sometimes,
what was that?
go ahead.
Okay.
I had to mute myself.
So I was thinking of networking as like the specific elevator pitch, like pitching yourself to someone. So what's the difference between networking and the elevator pitch, and when are each appropriate?
Well, I can talk about your elevator pitch, and I kind of hate that phrase, but it can suffice. Is really a way to make yourself memorable. So I have hired tons of people throughout my career, and it's really interesting what makes them memorable. Most of the time it is in their elevator speech, but sometimes it isn't. Your elevator speech is simply sort of a capsule of who you are and what you do. And so it shouldn't start out, well, I'm a lawyer and I handle intellectual property, or I'm a student and I've studied history and political science. It should really be something that focuses on what makes you, what makes you special and memorable. And it should be something good. So it could be, it could be something that you've done in your spare time. For instance, I hired a young lawyer who actually started a pro bono service because his grandparents couldn't do work around the house. So he started he started to do it himself for his grandparents, and then his friends got involved, and he ended up with this little company of volunteers who helped the elderly. And it just was struck such a chord with me, because people think of young lawyers as people who are just, wanting to make a lot of money and very sort of self-centered, but that just made him so memorable to me. It could be what you've covered at the Collegian. If you're looking for a job, that's an important thing that I would remember. In my day, I covered faculty unionization, which was, I thought, a pretty boring topic, but that made me memorable to people. So it's something either in your personal interests. It helps if it's, focused around what you want from this particular person you're networking with. So if you want a job, you probably should focus on something you've done professionally, but make yourself memorable, and memorable in a good way. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would sort of view it. I mean, I always think of elevator pitch. By the very nature, elevator pitch, or it sounds like you're selling something, okay? And I think that networking, while there's an element, of course, of wanting to bring your best self to the table and have them, appreciate who you are and what you bring, the objective is to build, not to sell. So you're trying to build a relationship. And so that by its nature takes a little bit of a different path. It's a little more of a gentle path. It's a little bit more of a engaging the person in a discussion. And ideally you have more than what you would have in an elevator. You have perhaps asked them for 20 minutes of their time. And so during that 20 minutes of their of the dialogue that you have with them, you're really hoping to make some sort of connection, to find some sort of rapport so that you can continue that relationship going forward. So I think that's another thing to consider when you contrast the two.
Yeah, they're probably. I agree with what you're both saying. They're totally intertwined in many ways. In certain instances, a good elevator pitch, if you look at it through the lens of sort of to Robyn's point, what's your story, can probably help you to accelerate your networking to a degree. And sort of having that story or that ask, at the ready is I think is important, and important to practice as well. But I honestly think at the end of the day, I think you in life, you'll get it better to think about it through the networking lens and get good at that. Because I think most often, when it's time to go make that pitch or sell or whatever it is that you're asking for, you'll have the benefit of time and practice, ideally, to help you with that elevator pitch. And again, I think in the nature of networking, you're going to want to get good at just having conversations that have two-way value anyway. And ideally, you'd never even need to make the elevator pitch to sort of get what you need, if that makes sense. It'll happen because they'll have thought of you because of who you are and what you've offered. And it'll also happen because you'll have built that relationship and invested the time.
Awesome. That's very helpful. So I know I always get super nervous when networking and talking to new people. So do you have any tips for being confident?
Well, I would say you always want to be prepared. First of all, you want to have a goal, and you want to understand what your goal is, but you need to be prepared, whether it's a virtual meeting, a virtual interview, or sort of fact-finding session, a networking event, or any other situation. You want to be prepared. So you want to know you want to know what your goal is. You want to know what you're going to say. If you have an interview, develop questions about the company and their strategy. You can practice that with somebody you trust. Make sure your computer's working and you don't have any troubles like I am having today. But you want to minimize your stress. So being prepared is the best way to do that. And you want to care deeply about, your work, and you want to do an exceptional job. You want people to walk away or come away from the meeting with knowing that you're a doer and not a slacker. So any way that you can get that across would be really good. But my thing is, be prepared. And the other thing is, ask the person, be interested in the person that you are interviewing with. As I said before, it's really important to listen and to make this a two-way street, and not just all about you and your list of 100 questions on how you could get ahead. You want to learn about how did that person succeed in his or her career. So you want to listen a little bit.
I definitely agree on the point of being a good listener. Once you've prepared, okay, that takes a lot of the stress, as Robyn was saying, out of it, because you know what you're going to say. You're almost benefited in a way by not having it be in person, because you can sort of subtly have your little list beside you if you need it, and that's always helpful. And then, what I always tell my kids when they're in a situation like that is I say, well, when in doubt, ask people lots of questions about themselves. And the reality is that, people generally are very happy to tell you their story and tell you about themselves. And, just sort of building on what Robyn said, being a good listener, encouraging them, asking a follow-up kind of question when they're on a roll. I mean, that goes a long way. My daughter had, she's a junior, just like I think you are, Michaela, and she had a networking call the other day, and she had her list of questions, and I don't think she got 2 questions out because the person she was talking to was, so eager to share and just went on and on and on. And so the whole, 20 minutes or whatever was kind of filled up. So you're going to have that too. And obviously in that situation, you just encourage them. And, I'm sure as far as this woman was concerned, it was the best discussion ever. I don't think my daughter got her questions answered, but that's okay. You've hopefully planted a seed, and it's a little bit of a garden. You've got your seed planted, just come around a little later with a little water, give it a little fertilizer, right back and tell them how much you appreciated, their insight on X or Y or Z, something specific that they shared with you, and ask if you might circle back in the future to follow up, and then wait an appropriate amount of time and circle back. But I think if you're prepared and you're a good listener, you'll have a good session.
Love that. I was thinking when you asked the question too, Michaela, about, we've all taken the public speaking courses that are mandatory, high school and college. And as I recall, when you first start those classes, or when you're preparing how to become a better presenter, et cetera, they tend to make you get up there and talk about something you're comfortable about, something and so from a confidence perspective, you guys are everyone on this call is an expert in lots of things, and probably lots of things that are different from the 3 of us, and I do think when you come from a place of strength, some of that you can practice and get really good at if you have the time to prepare. But keep in mind, some of the world of networking, sometimes the best parts of it are impromptu, again, that meeting on the plane or train or in class. And so, that part you won't have a chance to write down the questions in advance. And so if you're if you know your own strengths and you can sort of speak with some intelligence and be succinct about it, back to the elevator pitch part about like, what you're good at, what you're working on, what's really interesting, and the topic, I think that will make you memorable, to use Robyn's word. I think that will make you, I think you'll come from a place of confidence because you're not BSing, there's value in BS, believe me, in this world, but in the case of really trying to build a new relationship from a networking perspective, to leave a good impression in that case, because you're coming from a place of strength, I think that will boost your confidence. And also, again, back to sort of the preparing without preparing specifically for something, read and pay attention to what's going on, because in conversation before, sometimes to the point Karen was making, some of that conversation, I bet the first question probably wasn't even a question. It was a quick sort of what's going on in the world, or a comment about life or work or whatever this year, and off you go. And that tends to be the first 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes of even a client conversation or an interview. You're just trying to get to know the person by comparing notes and seeing how they are and being people. And I think, again, confidence stems from knowledge and from being confident in who you are and what you know and where you're comfortable talking. So, the more, and that's, again, you're at a place in your lives in school, you guys are soaking up stuff that we don't know much about, or we forgot long ago. And so, you have all this bedrock that makes you interesting, and should make you confident. And the rest is just sort of standing on your feet and trusting yourself.
And I can add to that too, in terms of reading everything and being just sort of aware and curious, which you all are. Think of something you can follow up with. So it might be an article, you wrote, it might be an article you read, but sort of just to follow up with the person that you're networking with. Again, you want to make yourself memorable. You want to be seen as somebody who takes action and as a doer. Make sure it's pertinent. Don't follow up with something that's not, relevant, but follow up. And I think that everything that we're saying about these networking sessions can be applied to a lesser degree on your online presence as well. I mean, bolster your LinkedIn. You should all link in with Collegian AIG. I mean, a lot of us have contacts that you might not care about us, but you might care about some contacts you see. Follow influential people online. Just sort of show you're interested in people and issues and content, and same with some of the other social media, Instagram, Facebook. Don't post what can come back and haunt you, but certainly post things that make you an interesting person.
Awesome. Thank you. Karen, I really liked your garden analogy. I thought that was very, like, a good visual to think about it. So this is the last question I have for you guys before we see if anyone else has any questions. But what do you think is the best question to ask in a formal networking situation if you're looking for a job in that company?
Well, that is tricky.
This is your real elevator pitch. If you get this right, you're in business. I mean, I look, there's the school of thought here that if you're a candidate for that, for a role, or would like to be a candidate for a role at that company, that there is a school of thought to ask about what that person looks for in a successful fill in the blank role. Which can be modified in a number of ways. What do you need right now? What's, what are the, where are the areas that you're really looking for talent, and what is differentiating talent right now in your eyes? Things like that. I think that's one way to get it, but get at it. The other thought that I would have here would be, to maybe ask that person to be in your shoes for a moment, which, again, people throw out that way of approaching it, I think, loosely quite a bit. But I do think, I know in business, I'll use that sometimes to say, like, hey, I talked to a guy this afternoon from Cisco, and, I definitely used something along those lines. Hey, if you were in my shoes, and you're thinking ahead about 2021, where are the holes in your game that you would have me think about? Like, as I go back to my world and you go back to yours, what should I keep my eyes and ears open for that would be useful and valuable to you? And I think you could translate that here as well. Same sort of thing. Like, where is the company going? Where is your team or your job going? Make it, again, personal to them, because they'll be comfortable speaking there more so than broadly. And it'll take it out of just a cliched question and answer into more about, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Where are you going within Cisco or whatever? And how do you think that may open up opportunities for people like me, / the skills that I might need to still acquire to become the sort of person that would be valuable to your team or your firm? I think that's how you want to do it, to try to personalize it, and to get that person feeling very confident about being able to give you an answer that isn't just a throwaway, like, well, you got to apply to HR, and, it's a busy time, blah, 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 blah. Like, you don't want stock. You want something of real value.
Yeah, that's great advice, Jordan. I like that a lot. Another angle that's similar might be, you could say to them, tell me a little bit about some recent graduates that you've hired, and how have they been successful transitioning into the workplace, and what were the skills that they brought to the table that you most valued? And you try to engage them a little bit in a discussion about people that they might actually know that entered the workforce more recently, and you might get them talking about how they came to be there, the kinds of things that the company values, and possibly that opens up an avenue for you to say, wow, that's really interesting. I would love to learn more about those entry-level type of positions. Would you recommend anyone that I could talk to learn more about what it's like to start out in your company? That kind of thing. It's a little gentle, not to like, do you have jobs? But what can you do to sort of keep keep the conversation going. You're trying to make sure that you have something to take away from it, that potentially that you could do, where you can learn more about successful people that have entered before you, and maybe even get, you know, a contact that's a little bit more recent that you could add to your network.
I really like that. And I also like what qualities does it take for somebody like me, would somebody like me need to have to succeed at your company? You know, again, sort of playing on, you know, where the company is going and how can I contribute to it. It also pays, just a slightly different point, to know somebody at the company where you're interviewing, so that, again, sort of to make your networking pay off. If you know someone at the company with whom you're interviewing, that's always a huge resource, because then you could sort of get the skivvy on, you know, what it's really like to work there. You know, how do they promote young people? Would it be a dead end job if I were to go there and not, you know, and be relatively inexperienced? So it always pays to know someone. And again, that sort of points to the power of the network, and that includes your virtual network as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That's it for questions from me. Does anyone else in the discussion have anything they want to ask?
I'll add something, if allowed. This might not be a shared opinion.
Yes.
No, not allowed. I would say, you know, like, from my perspective, like, and Karen and Robyn, I think, touched on it a little bit too. Like, there's, I've had a few people who have reached out, nobody from the Collegian, nobody even from Penn State, but people who had other, a little bit more junior than me at other places, have reached out with like a kind of a very like forward, like, not the exact words of this, but like, got me jobs sort of connection. And it was very off-putting, and I don't, you know, so I think there's somewhat of a fine way of starting the conversation and being a little bit more about learning more versus just going into that very transactional, what you got sort of place. And I think, you know, for me personally, when I changed my mindset, networking, I'm an extrovert, but networking does not come naturally to me. When I changed it to just trying to learn more and get smarter from other people, it freed up the conversation in a different way versus keeping it a very transactional sort of idea. So, but anyway, so be careful of how you're seeking information, I guess.
Yeah, that's great insight. Michaela, I thought of one other thing. It's more like logistical, and how do you keep track of all your network and your contacts? And I think Robyn mentioned LinkedIn and what a useful tool that is. And of course it certainly is, but I also tend to use my contacts. I have Apple, and I have like a contacts button, and in there's like this category called notes. And so if I talk to somebody, I'm going to put them in my contacts. I'm going to indicate in my notes when I talk to them. And then I might say something like, oh, their son went to USC. They're a big Patriots fan. We both love cheesecake. You know, whatever it is that we might have that we talked about, so that when I try to connect with them again, I can, you know, demonstrate that, you know, I remembered something that they told me, and I could jog their memory about something that we talked about, or, you know, just sort of, you know, recall that very easily. And I think that's a very good tactic to help you with that second call that comes after the first call, to sort of pick up a little bit where you left off. So I just offer that as kind of more like a tactic than a strategy, but I think you might find it useful.
And I think that again proves that you're listening to the person. I do the same thing, Karen, so
Yeah.
that I know, oh, Jordan's got 3 kids, not 2, and they take piano lessons. I just think it just really helps you make that connection human, because after all, we are sort of all here in a very trying time, trying to get our work done and get ahead. So I think that's really important to, again, listen and know what they told you the first time you talk to them, even on a personal basis.
Yeah, and again, same note about, I don't think that many people take initiative. I don't think a large percentage of even those that take initiative listen all that well. So, you know, if you can put the two together, you know, go the extra effort, the minimum effort, and then also prove that you've listened, by virtue of what you reach out with and how thoughtful you are. You know, again, if you had a conversation with, you know, so and so at Cisco today, and then you see a story in 3 weeks, you know, about, you know, inclusive workforce or reskilling or whatever, and you send it and you say, hey, I thought you might find this interesting. You know, it's in line with what we were talking about the other day, you know, or 3 weeks ago when we chatted. You know, it proves that you're on your game and that you're still thinking about that conversation and that you remembered accurately what that conversation was. And then again, I think that's, you know, it's going to improve your odds of getting any response, and certainly a positive response. And I also think, I mean, this an anecdote that we may have talked about, Michaela, when we were prepping for today. To me, I'm a big believer in, you sort of like, you never really know who's paying attention to your performance, and your actions. And I think if you are, and this I think is important from a networking perspective, certainly after you get your first job as well. And you kind of like, you need to be always on in many cases, because I mean, ultimately, you know, when you might not get that elevator pitch moment to advocate for yourself in many ways, right? Like one of the bigger jobs I've gotten in my life was because a boss that thought that I had done a good job for him, had retired, and then happened to be back in the same building and bumped into my eventual next boss, and the two didn't know each other. They just had a conversation. One was out to lunch, was introduced to someone else, blah 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 blah. They were one was looking for a new hire. The other one knew about me, but, you know, hadn't worked with me in some time. But I left enough of a good impression, and had done the job there. That, you know, again, and it's a little bit of networking, a little bit of just, you know, again, sort of being consistent with who you are and how you work. But the lesson I think about is that a lot of the big decisions when it comes to job opportunities and people thinking about you, it's going to happen without you in the room. So, you know, it's what they say when you're not in the room that matters. It's the anti-Hamilton in many ways. You won't be in the room where it matters, where it happens. But they'll be talking about you. And so, you know, if you think about that and sort of pull back for a minute and say, okay, so how do I leave a good impression in my first email or call? If I have a happenstance or a chance to meet with someone in person, you know, how do I make sure it's a good impression? How am I thoughtful about it, so that when the time comes, you know, when there's an opening, or whether you know about it or not, it's easier for you to make the ask if that's the opportunity, or ideally, without you ever even knowing about it, you get the call, you get someone looking at your LinkedIn all of a sudden, you know, and so they think of you, which again is why I think if you do it well, you know, as you get out into the real world, the first job, second job, third job, whatever it may be, if you do it well, this starts to get easier, ideally, because you've built enough of a network and enough people in those networks that you've impressed, that they start to think about you and maybe reach out to you, and you get positive recommendations, sometimes without even knowing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And don't forget that people have to know, like, and trust you before they're going to do anything with you. So that just everything that Jordan said, you want the more people who know, like, and trust you, the better. And the other thing I'll second is the differentiator of initiative. Initiative is just, people just don't do it. And it's amazing to me, if you're looking for a job and you don't take the initiative, you don't do a follow-up letter, you don't take any initiative to basically follow up with the person that you want the job from. It just amazes me that people don't do that. It's a huge differentiator. And you want to be seen as a doer. You don't want to be seen as somebody who just puts obstacles in the path of progress. So especially when you're getting a job.
And to that end, you jogged something in my memory, Robyn, when you mentioned, writing a thank you note or after you've met with someone. But I think also even if you reach out to someone, you ask for some of their time and they share with you, in addition to keeping track of what you talked about, obviously just immediately before you move on to the next thing, shoot them a note that indicates how much you appreciated their time, share something that you gained from the conversation, and hopefully close with the opportunity to connect again if you have questions, or you just sort of reinforce it. Just do it right away. It's a great practice, and it will help you stick out in the mind of the person that you talk to. Maybe they'll even slide it into a little folder that they have, and it's just an extremely good practice, and you don't want to miss the opportunity to make a good impression or solidify the good impression that you made when you were speaking to them.
And it only takes a minute. It's just a short note. Only takes a minute.
Yeah, so going off of that, I feel like a lot of the students in this discussion are kind of in like a similar situation. So last semester, I was applying for internships for last summer. Sorry, it's loud outside. And things were going well, but then with COVID and everything, the whole internship program was canceled, right? So now I'm still looking for internships for this upcoming summer. So how do you suggest I talk to that recruiter again to kind of reconnect with them?
This is someone who you had initiated discussions with, or it was an internship that you were
I made it through the third round of interviews, and I was waiting to hear back, and then that's when they canceled it. So I wasn't definitely in it, but I had a lot of conversations with them.
Well, you wouldn't have made it to the third round if you hadn't made good impressions of people along the way. So you did a good job. Have you been in touch with that person since that time?
No, I just said, thank you for reaching out. Let me know if anything else comes up. And then that was the end of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When was that? How long ago?
That was in March. Yeah.
I would personally pick up the phone or shoot a note. I mean, it might be too late, but you have nothing to lose. So
yeah, I just don't want to come across as do you have internships? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Michaela, I definitely wouldn't wait. I mean, and honestly, you don't have to reach out and say, do you have an internship? You can just reach out to say, just to offer an update on what you're doing right now, / to ask for an update on how things are going with the company. And if it's just an HR person, that's fine. You might want to do a little sleuth work and see if there's, who the reporting or hiring manager might have been, if you don't know that. But you also could see if there's any opportunity to do some work for them from a freelance temp perspective, either over winter break or right now. If they have something project based, that would be a chance to sort of prove yourself right now. I mean, look, any opportunity to do something would then make you a stronger candidate for whatever's to come. And again, proving that you could do something for them in this remote, weird time only solidifies the fact that you could do something for them, more extended, in a probably still weird time come next summer. So I would take the initiative and maybe, try to be proactive about it. And look, HR is a funny beast. And, I do think that there's, right, you might get one answer from the person who runs the recruiting program, who sort of is trained to just be focused on the recruiting program and that timeline. But again, if there's a team that you would have been part of for last summer, maybe worth, even if it's a cold outreach, to say, hey, I was, try to get to that person. Could even be an email if you don't get the email. And hey, I was close. I was interviewing, and I was really excited about last summer. What a weird year. Wanted to catch up on myself, see if you guys have any opportunities as you look to next year, see how things are happening with your team. And also, hey, by the way, if you have any need for the, as I used to call it, the winternship, pretty good, right? I
trademarked it.
Yeah. But seriously, you guys, you're going to be, finals, or it's a weird schedule this year, right? You're going to be home for like 6 or 8 weeks or so. So like,
Yeah, we go home for Thanksgiving and then we're there for the foreseeable future.
so there you go. So, I mean, so, you know, is there an opportunity to get ahead of that now and offer value that you might be able to do for them? Again, could be project based, could be, you know, hopefully it's paid, but just float that idea. Take the initiative on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I second that. I've got a niece and a nephew. My niece is at Bryn Mawr. She's a rising senior, and my nephew's at University of South Carolina. And they both rescue their internships doing stuff online. I don't know, I don't know if how much they're getting paid, but I was so pleased that they just didn't let us, well, we're not going to be there, we can't do it. So I really encourage you to follow up and don't feel bad about it, because it shows initiative. This is a good thing. And you're not going to come out and say, hey, what about that internship you promised me? I mean, you're going to be very, very good about how you go in and follow up. You just wanted to follow up and, use some of the words Jordan gave you. It's all good.
Think of it this way. If they liked you last year, you even know more stuff and have more experience this year. So there's no reason they shouldn't like you just as much, if not more.
Thank you.
Michaela, by the way, I wouldn't just also go back to the one place that you were 3 rounds in. I'd pull back and expand it again. I can't tell you how many friends and colleagues, whether it's in the media world or on the brand side, like a lot of, CMOs, heads of marketing, advertising people, heads of content, that work at brands like Hilton and Marriott, they're all trying to figure out how are we going to do more with less. They don't have staff. So some were furloughed, some worse than that, and they're not coming back. And so, they still have big ambition and they still want to produce great content. And, whether it's newsroom side, or maybe more on the business side or somewhere in that gray area, but expand the network a little bit. And I can almost guarantee you that if you sort of take that tone of, hey, I have great skills and I have time and I'm really interested in the following things, I noticed that you guys, again, think of something specific to the person you're reaching out to, as we've been saying, but I noticed blah, 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 blah. Do you have any needs short term? Is there something, when I'm going to be off for winter break for 7 weeks, something I can help you guys with, project based that, that I can do remote from home, et cetera, et cetera. See if you can get a bite.
Right. And look outside your universe. I mean, look at pharmaceutical companies or drug companies, and I'd just be creative where you looked if you're going to expand beyond that particular company.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Does anyone else have any questions?
I mean, I'd love to hear from some students if you guys have been, networking or what's worked or what's been frustrating or any challenges you guys have run into. Would love to hear anything from you guys too.
Lily, do you want to say anything?
Lily got called on.
Put her on the spot.
Sure. I guess that does kind of bring up a question I was thinking about, but was a bit timid to ask. But did you guys, like, as you were going through your careers and like building up, did you guys ever do any like major networking mistakes that you were kind of like, oh gosh, I can't believe I did that, I would never do that again?
Oh yes, without a doubt. I mean, and anyone who says that they haven't is lying. There's a lot. I without thinking about it for too long, I think I've made the mistake of reaching out without really knowing my timing. So like, I've reached out to people for something, whatever it may have been, and there were layoffs at the company that day, or it was earnings day, and I should have known better that they would be A, very busy, or B, that this was it was poor timing. There's good timing in the world, timing's everything, and there's bad timing, and I also have, probably knowing myself and sometimes being either too aggressive or more so maybe more too impatient. I have probably overreached out to people at times where, you know, sometimes you don't get a response for a week. People are also busy. People are also out of the office. They travel, they miss emails, if it's an email. And, you know, so I've probably in some instances not been able to help myself. And that's a mistake. And something you learn over time to sort of, you know, put a note. A lot of this, again, is being organized. Put a note to yourself, when actually did I reach out? You know, is there something going on in the world? They're probably busy. How much more time do I want to give it? You know, I think that's, I've made that mistake, you know, many times. And I've also, you know, there've been times when admittedly I've been unprepared, and I, you know, it's going to happen to you. It's probably happened at some point in classwork, you know, whether it was a test or a presentation. There've been times when I wish I was more prepared for what became a strong networking opportunity. And that's, you know, that's on you, and you learn or you don't, right? So either you become more prepared and you know your subject better next time, and you've done your homework and you've done your reading and you've practiced, etc. Or you're willing to continue to roll the dice like that and maybe lose opportunities. So I think that's, you know, those are mistakes that I've certainly made.
I would say when I think back on to myself, I sort of, all the things that I'm telling you guys to do are in a way lessons that I didn't do myself. I think that I had so many missed opportunities. You know, you have a long day and there's some sort of cocktail party or some sort of reception or some sort of something, and you were intending to go, but you're looking for every excuse in the book not to go, and you don't go, and you missed opportunities. And this happens all the time. So try really hard to prevent yourself from talking yourself out of going to something, because you know it's going to be kind of uncomfortable and it might be a little awkward because you don't know anyone. Just push yourself, and it will pay off. And the other thing, I think, I sort of looked at it as kind of a byproduct of doing my job. I didn't look at it as a skill that I needed to be, you know, successful well beyond that current job that I was in. I didn't have a methodical approach to it. I didn't carve out the appropriate amount of time in my day to make sure that I did that kind of thing. I'd say that, you know, to sort of hold yourself accountable is something that you should try to do the best you possibly can. You set yourself some goals, you set yourself some reminders, and you hold yourself accountable, and trust us. I mean, the last, I would say at least 3 or 4 opportunities that I've had have all come from people I knew in networks. They were never gonna come through me sending a resume into some, you know, website. So I can't emphasize enough that it's extremely valuable. And it's easy to put off, and it's easy to push aside because there seems to be something that is more urgent, but it's not something that you should push aside. You don't have to do it all in one day, but you definitely have to cultivate yourself a little garden of contacts and networks, and it'll value it. And these people, we make it sound like, you know, these are people that can help you and whatnot. Your network is also going to become your friends and going to become your colleagues and people that you respect and that you enjoy. So I guess the biggest thing I would say is don't neglect it, and don't fall prey to your inner person who wants to just go home and put on her slippers and not go to that cocktail party.
And I've got another story that is kind of the opposite of Jordan's, but I remember when I was a very young vice president at Edelman, when I went to the dark side, and headhunters started to notice me, and I got a call from a headhunter who had a job at Playboy Enterprises. Well, I was appalled and really didn't want to talk to that person, and just couldn't believe that I got this call. And then I almost just said what I thought to the headhunter, and thank goodness I bit my tongue, because I thought, well, this would be an opportunity to learn something. Christy Hefner was the president and CEO, and that's who I reported to as a VP of communications. And so I went, and I really enjoyed meeting her, and I really had a good time, and I ended up taking that job, which was never in my career plan. And I was appalled at the idea, but I had a really fun time. I met so many famous people and artists, and Andy Warhol took my picture. And what I'm saying is don't set boundaries. So kind of step outside your comfort zone. Don't do anything you're terribly uncomfortable with. You certainly don't want to do anything, that goes against your morals. But I really enjoyed my time at that company, and I built on that. And I didn't want to do it my whole career, but I had a very enjoyable 7 years at that place. So don't set boundaries for yourself. And sometimes you can just say no, but you really should say yes. Like going to that cocktail party after your 12-hour day, it all pays off. Sometimes the best decisions for you are things that you think, I don't think I want to do that, but I guess I should.
Thank you, Lily. That was a great question. Thank you, everyone, for answering. Does anyone else have anything they would like to ask or talk about?
This might be obvious, but I would just also point out, like, if you have an alumni such as ourselves at any point, that is whether, or if it's in your classes and you've got guest speakers and they're offering to help, take them up on it. Like Jordan's right. Like there's not many students and people that would lean forward and participate in that. And if you have an alumni saying they're willing to help, like that's just short of an open door, and of where I heard you talk, I saw this. So, you have a pretty wide berth of like the type of question that you can ask and bring in just to learn more, and a gateway to follow up. So it's not quite a cold call to somebody in a network or connection to get there. So just kind of reinforcing those opportunities. And even if they're not actively involved in the alumni network, the Collegian, one of the benefits of the Collegian is that extension of there's many alumni that are out there that maybe aren't actively involved, but you have a great talking point or sounding board, and the vast majority are going to be willing to help. So that's a shameless plug, maybe. I don't know. Join the AIG.
Amen. And Lily, you can't, not that you can't make a mistake with an alumni base like ours, but we're like, we get it, right? Like we're going to be far more forgiving than maybe like the first employer. Whether it's like I'm not saying be lax about your outreach by any stretch, but I do think like, if you sent the note on earnings day or a day when people were let go, I mean, we wouldn't necessarily expect you to necessarily know that as much. And so I think you're going to find a pretty friendly voice. And look, that this is the most obvious thing that I'll say, but there's when you choose to go to Penn State, I mean, one of the values, I mean, all the stats around how many dues paying alumni are out there, like there's not a lot of schools that can say that, so if you go to Penn State and then you don't take advantage of the network of Penn State, both, when you're in school, when you're just out of school, and frankly, forever, and by that, I also mean the extended network of sort of the Big Ten. I mean, I'm not kidding. I've been out at like ad agencies, and I'll walk down the hall on the way to a meeting, and I see like a Michigan State or a Michigan flag, and I'll lean over the cubicle back when we were in offices, and I'll talk some smack, and get the person's name, and like, boom, like there you go. You've met someone through the lens of Penn State in that case. I think you've got to take advantage of that every step of the way, and really never lose that connection, because it's a big part of the value of choosing a huge school like Penn State with so much pride, and people who are loud about it, right? Like, I mean, if you pass a Penn Stater on the street, that they're probably wearing something, or there's a car sticker or whatever, like we let you know who we are, and again, the door is open regardless of who you are. So use that. Think about that a lot, whether it's through the LinkedIn lens or whatever. Think about that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm not sure if there's anything else we should talk about or go over. I guess if no one has any more questions.
Michaela, one thing that occurred to me that we didn't touch on, but I think it's important to consider is, let's say you've done some of these things and you've fostered a relationship with one or more, alumni or contacts, and that you've developed a rapport and you've developed some trust, and they're willing to now advocate for you to go in contact with one of their colleagues, or they're going to open a door for you. It's extremely important that you take that very seriously and you show up on time, you're, respectful, you're prepared, you're, at that point in time, you become an emissary of that person that you built a relationship with. And if you don't reflect well on them in that engagement, that subsequent engagement, the chances of them opening a door for you in the future are really small. So not to put an extra burden on you, but just realize that that's like such a cool thing when somebody is supportive enough of you to open a door for you. You have to really be respectful of that and take advantage of it and do everything you can, not just to, just being yourself and doing your thing, but being prepared and understand that you're reflecting on that person that recommended you. So just another thing to consider when you get to that stage.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really helpful point to keep in mind.
I'll note too, for any students that that need it, all of our emails I think are on the invite and or the note that Megan sent out with the Zoom link this morning. So if you guys have questions that you don't want to ask in front of the full group, or you think of later tonight or next year or whatever, hit us up. We'll respond and we won't judge. We might spell check, but we won't judge. And yeah, we're here, and obviously, in the case of the four of us that are on, we represent the Collegian AIG board. So there's both a larger network of board members and a far larger network of alumni behind that. So, if you're ever saying, hey, is there an alumni that works somewhere, or I'm interested in doing the following, do we know anyone? Probably a good chance we can find someone with a relevant response for you.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here and giving us your time and your expertise. And I know I really appreciate it. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes, appreciate the time. Thanks for the questions. Good job, Michaela.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michaela. Good luck. Good luck with your internship.
Thank you.